We're really excited. Probably my voice. So my name is Ellen Martins, and we are waiting. Celestine is trying to find parking, but I thought we would get started until she gets here, and as we're quieter, it'll be easier to hear me and our storytellers. I want to welcome you. This event is produced by Freetown Village and Storytelling Arts of Indiana. It is sponsored by Maestro Organizing and WFYI. And tonight I also want to give out a shout to the family of Michael O'Brien because they are our season sponsors for everything that we do. Samantha, who's standing right here, she has the slips. If you want to tell a story and you haven't filled out a slip, please raise your hand and Samantha will bring them to you. The way this works is you have 5 minutes to tell a true story in first person based on our theme. And our theme tonight is teachers. So that should be, I think this is going to be a wonderful topic. We're going to begin with Greg coming up. He's from Maestro Organizing, and he's going to kind of set the stone, tell us a little stories related to teachers and his business.
Thank you. It's so nice to see all these people eating and getting ready to tell stories. I look forward to this every month. It's an honor to help sponsor this event as Maestro Organizing. I want you to know that I'm a composer and conductor, and I'm a teacher. My degree is music education, and I work with kids all year long, thousands of kids. I've got a concert at Carnegie Hall in June. I'll have about 250 kids there that I'll be waving my arms to. How many of you like to sing? Anybody like to sing? Okay, I got the thing just for you. I've got adults, and we're going to Spain in September, and we sing a few concerts, and the rest of the time, we eat, drink, and go sightseeing. It's just for you. So I left my cards on the table, and I want you to know that as Maestro Organizing, I'm also a teacher. And how many have any clutter? Anybody in the room? Do you have a junk drawer? You all have a junk drawer, I know you do. Well, I am here to help. I help my clients, declutter and discover their organized life. And if you need that kind of help because it's springtime and you'd like to park in your garage, I'm the guy. So, welcome to Story Slam. It is great to be here, and reach out if you need. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not funny like Celestine, so until she gets here, you'll have to put up with me. But our first storyteller tonight is Maureen
Oh, I'm not taking a picture. I'm hiding.
Just so everyone, all the storytellers know, we have a timer, a person who's timing us, and she just wants you to know she's timing you, and she will raise her hand when 4 minutes are up, so you know you have 1 more minute.
So, I've been in the field of education, or was in the field of education for 43 years before I retired. And before becoming a professor and teaching others to teach, I was in a classroom for 12 years, from kindergarten through 8th grade, mostly in kindergarten. And in kindergarten, I felt every emotion possible, but mostly I felt laughter. Because when you have those little unpredictable 5-year-olds, you just never know what's going to come out of their mouths. One day we were talking about meat, where do you get pork? Where do you get beef? And we talked about bird meat being called poultry. So I had one little guy who said to me, teacher, some of them birds like to sit up on poles, some of them birds like to sit up in trees. That's why they call it poultry. That was pretty wise for a five-year-old. And then another day we were making applesauce, and everyone was supposed to bring an apple to contribute. And I had one little guy who came in holding this little apple core, and he saw me, and he said, teacher, somebody ate my apple. And I said, well, who? He said, me. He just continued to fly. So in everything, they're totally fascinated with our thoughts, especially ones that adults consider private. And one day, a very, I don't know what I want to say, a red-faced father came in with his little girl in the morning. He said, well, we just stopped at CVS, and we were in a long line. In her loudest voice, she said to me, Daddy, how was your penis today? He said, I just put down what I was going to buy. And then I had the day that all 30 children were really engaged in the story, listening, so excited, and you could hear a pin drop. Well, the next thing I knew, from the little bathroom in the side of the classroom, I heard, teacher, my penis is stuck in my zipper and I can't get it out. Well, I was the only one who batted an eye over that one. It was pretty normal. So we fixed it and moved on. And then there were just so many great things about these kids. I had a whole class of 5-year-olds who knew that one child had an imaginary friend. And these kids were so involved in this whole situation. They would save him a place to sit. They would give him milk every day. They would give him paper and crayons. They made sure that he always had everything everyone else had. And they talked to him. Well, we also had a phys ed teacher in that building named Mr. Anderson. And when I would say, well, it's time for gym, and they'd get lined up, and then Mr. Anderson would show up, and they'd all say, Jim's here. Hi, Jim. He was just didn't know what to do. But then there was a day that he stepped on the imaginary friend. Oh my goodness. The children were berserk. Jim, you stepped on early. Jim, they were just crazy. And this poor man, he wasn't used to kindergarten. He didn't really know what to do. But anyway, we enjoyed him. And right outside our classroom door, we had a baseball field. And the kids loved to go out there at recess time. And they had no balls, no bats, no gloves, nothing except their own imaginations. And they would play the best game of baseball, but I was supposed to be the umpire. I was supposed to call outs and call safe, and with no balls or anything. It's really challenging. And they would argue with me about, whatever. But it was just a really fun group of kids because they had such wonderful imaginations. But my final story is about a little boy who came in one day with a big bouquet of stems, just stems, no flowers. And he said, teacher, I got you these because I love you. And he said, but something happened to the flowers when I was coming into school. He said, I don't know where they went. So we put them in the water and I thanked him. Well, a couple of hours later, the principal got a call from an irate woman at the bus stop. And she said, where are the children? had ruined her tulips that morning, and she was very upset. So the principal came down, he investigated with the older kids and discovered who did it. He came down and gave my class a real stern lecture, but really, well, half of them were in tears because, they took him very seriously. They were afraid of him. And he was a very kind man, but anyway, this poor little guy was in a fetal position, sobbing and saying, "Teacher, I just wanted you to know I loved you." What this did for me was, first we all drew tulips so we could send the lady some more tulips. And then we wrote a letter saying we were sorry, we wouldn't do this again. But then what it did for me was remind me that there were parents who had nurtured those children way more than tulips. And my job, my main job, was to have their little hearts in my hand and take care of them and nurture them and recognize that research has shown for years the only way we learn is if we feel comfortable and loved and good about ourselves. So that was a good reminder for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thanks for sharing your story. Okay, our next storyteller is Jen Lee.
So this isn't so much as a story as just a thank you, and I had notes so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say. But if you were lucky, you had a teacher who made a difference in your life. It was a perfect combination of patient, encouraging, challenging, and fun. Maybe he or she could even be described as magical. If you were really lucky, you had Miss Mattingly. Miss Mattingly was my third grade teacher. And in all my years of grade school, high school, college, and grad school, she remains one of the best teachers I've ever had. She was like that perfect teacher from a Roald Dahl book. She had the best smile, the biggest heart, and she made school fun. Every Halloween, I remember she dressed up as Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, complete with a basket with Toto and the glittery red slippers. She had a prize closet with the most wonderful prizes and a continual raffle going. One of my favorite parts of third grade was the spelling lessons, although I didn't know they were spelling lessons at the time. We would write stories using our spelling words, and then she'd read them to the class, and we'd vote on our favorites. It was one of my first experiences of story writing, and it really built my confidence as a writer, and I loved it. She organized this whole lesson where my class took a trip to Hawaii. We designed travel posters, wore Hawaiian shirts. The classroom turned into an airplane, complete with flight attendants bringing around snacks and drinks. And then it transformed into our destination with a party, a limbo, music, and dancing. I think it was the best day of school I've ever had. She took every class to Camp Rancho Cremasa overnight. She was so brave. Having been a teacher myself and knowing how nightmarish a field trip can be, I've come to appreciate even more the fact that she braved an overnight with all those students, the boys in my class, just to give us this incredible experience. And even after I moved on from third grade, Miss Mattingly remained part of my life always encouraging me, always remembering me, always making me feel special. And I know that I'm one of countless former students who can say that. And I think about my life since third grade. I went on to spend summer after summer at Camp Rancho Formasa. I became a camp counselor myself. I fell in love with writing and pursued an MFA in creative writing. When my husband Danny and I got married, we honeymooned in Hawaii. It wasn't quite as fun as Miss Mary's. And I eventually became a teacher where I tried to channel my inner Miss Mattingly and make the class as fun as possible. I even had my own prize closet. But most important, I tried to make sure that every student knew that he or she was loved. Clearly, this lady continues to have an influence on my life. Miss Mattingly has been at St. Pius X as long as I can remember, outlasting I don't know how many principals, I don't know how many co-teachers, and teaching I don't know how many children. I was blessed to have her as a third grade teacher 35 years ago. And ever since I found out she is retiring this year in less than 2 weeks, I think one more recess period that she has to work, I've been racking my brain trying to think of some way to thank her for the decades she gave and hundreds, thousands of lives she's touched. No party is big enough, no tribute great enough to appropriately recognize her. But I thought the least I could do was stand up and say thank you. You're an amazing teacher and person. You've made such a difference in my life, and I love you. Come on
Thank you so much, Jen. And Alice, Mrs. Radley, has been a volunteer for Storytelling Arts, I believe, for almost the 35 years that we've been in existence. So she is a wonderful person. And here is the real MC. So let's teach.
That's my rap name. You said everything already? Well, listen, I was fighting in the parking lot for a parking spot. And as soon as I backed up 3 or 4 times and squeezed into the spot that a truck had just left, then this Mercedes SUV pulled out just smoothly. I just wanted to need to let somebody know there are 2 spots open in a lot like that. But I'm glad to be here. Because teachers, that's my favorite subject. You know, when I was in college, people would always say, what you going to school for? Gotta be a teacher? I would go, no. And I would tell some of my former students, I say, who told me they were going to go to school so they can teach chemistry, or French, or English, or math. I said, have we taught you nothing? So they had to convince me that this is truly the profession they were called for. I hope everything has been said in this morning. Okay, so my stand-in has been doing a great job out here. I want you to know that I love to look at teachers' posts at the very beginning of the year when they start counting how many more Mondays they have left. Or I had one friend who posted that they were down to single digits and they were excited about it. But now I know I'm going to pull somebody else's name up out of this box. Oh, it was kind of light. They must have known I was coming. Because I got a lot of things to say about teachers. But right now we're going to listen to what Diane Walton wants to tell us about teachers. Well, I've never done this before.
Sorry, Diane.
Okay, don't be rough on me.
Testing.
I always wanted to do that. My name's Diane Walton. I've been a teacher for 33 years. I'm retired. I taught in IPS and Wayne Township schools. I was a special ed teacher. And I taught students with autism. A lot of difficulties with language and communication, but they always communicated with me. So the very first beginning of the year, they get to know their routines, and they stay in the classroom quite a bit until they're used to where they, what the routines are. And so it goes. We have they get through with being able to understand that we're going to have a fall break. Then we have teacher-parent conferences, and then we have Thanksgiving. Well, they were pretty excited about Thanksgiving because they get to go out into the regular ed, gen ed classrooms and do what they do. And one of the things that they were doing is that they would go there and they were talking about Thanksgiving, the history of Thanksgiving, the foods, the traditions, and they made a turkey. Okay? And they came back into the classroom and they were all excited sitting there, and they had all their paper turkeys, and they were all excited to tell me all about what they did. And next thing I know, this little boy comes up to me and he goes, "You're a turkey." I said, "I'm a turkey?" He goes, "You're a turkey." And you remember, these kids don't talk, right? So he's all excited to tell me that I'm a turkey. And I said, "Well, why, can you tell me what makes me a turkey?" He says, "You gotta gobble gobble." And he went like this. And I said, "Okay." I can't say the darndest thing, right? So then, the year moves on, and then the next thing I know is we are having a student teacher in our building, and we're really excited about the student teacher. And she gets to work with the kids. Her name's Miss B, and we're pretty excited. They loved her a lot, and so the next thing I know is I heard through the grapevine that Miss B was hired as a teacher for our school. And so I wanted to make sure the kids knew, right? I wanted to make sure that they knew that Miss B was going to be being a teacher at our building. So I went up to the board and I wrote, "Miss B is a teacher at our school." And I waited for them to come back in. I said, "Hey kids, look." I said, "Miss B is going to be a teacher." And this little boy goes, "No." I said, "No." He said, "No, she's not a teacher." I said, "Well, yeah, she is." I said, "I'm a teacher, and she's going to be a teacher." And he goes, "No, she's not a teacher." I kept saying, "Well, why?" He goes, "Well, she didn't have wings like you." When I got on the board, he said, you don't have any wings." So the kids say the darndest things, okay? So then there was this little boy, he was sitting, it was, got to springtime, and the storms start to happen, and there's thunder and lightning, and they're all going through their agendas and performing all the works they need to do so they get a free time. The free time was typically on the computer. And all of a sudden, boom, the electricity went off. This one little boy, Alex, was sitting there. And all of a sudden, he stood up. This is nonverbal. Stood up and said, "I've been deleted!" So I hope our world is kind to them. I hope they aren't deleted. Thanks. If you want to know the truth, just ask the child. They will tell you. That was hilarious. Hey, got a good one coming up here. Sam Powers, tell me about teaching.
So you think after 9.5 years of being a middle school teacher, two things. One, it would be easier to talk to a group of adults. And two, I would have better stories than this one coming up. But this one has stuck with me for so long. And when I heard that the theme was teacher, this was the first thing that popped into my head. So one misconception I think a lot of people have when they teach middle school is that they know a lot of things that they actually don't. They're a lot more like their elementary peers than one would assume. So we were reading an article one day about teachers and salaries, and one of my students said, well, I don't understand. What do you get paid hourly? And I said, well, some jobs you get paid by salary, and so I can work so many hours, it doesn't matter. They still just give me this, lump sum of money. And this particular student was a very curious kid by nature, and he looks at me and he goes, all right, what's your salary? And I thought, in this moment, this is the defining moment where you say, okay, am I going to show students what it's like for a teacher who is actually a human, or are you going to take the higher route and be a professional and give them the teacher-like answer? So I said, you know what, we're going to make this a teaching moment. That's what we like to call those, teaching moments. And I said, it's really not appropriate to ask people what they make. And he cuts me off. He goes, ooh, that bad, huh? And at that very moment, I stared at him and I gave him the human response and I walked away next.
I'm telling you, out of the mouth of babes. All righty, teachers. I want to let you know the next month we'll be at Chatham Tap at Butler. And if we have to, we'll move into a bigger room. So don't worry about the space. We might even move outdoors. It might be an overflow room. You never know. But the theme in June is secrets. And if you are a teacher, that's what's happening, okay? Because they will beat you down until they get the truth. And don't let them run into you at a grocery store. I remember being at Osco one time, and what I really needed was some rum for some daiquiris. And the moral of this story is, do not shop in the same district where your children. Well, guess what? Our next teller is Francis Whitner. White. Now, I know these stories have made you think about another one. So we got paper, we got pencils. You can still tell a tale.
I taught public speaking at IUP Live for 4.5 years. Rick and I moved here in the late 1970s, and I found a job teaching this subject shortly after we arrived. I didn't know until I heard the job that almost everyone who graduates from IUP Live has to pass the C110 storytelling. Not storytelling, sorry, speech class. I have many students I remember from telling the stories and tons of giving their speeches and teaching them speeches then. But there are two people I remember in particular. The first one is a young man named Ben. Now, we had started to tell how-to stories, and I tried to emphasize to everyone who's going to be telling stories. Now, be sure you explain what it is you want us to do or work with in the how-to store. He said, okay, all of the students said, yes, yes, Mrs. Whitener, we'll do that. So then he got up and said, you want to get high? You don't need drugs. Just learn to find your mantra. And I thought to myself, mantra. Now, what is a mantra? Well, I'm sure Ben will tell us what a mantra is. But he didn't. And I had to grade the speech. So finally, after it was over, I raised my hand and I said, Ben, what is a mantra? And I think he learned something then. I always remember him. But the student I will probably remember the most was a young lady named Alice. Alice was in the very first class that I ever taught there. And we were giving introductory speeches as the first speaker. The person was to introduce himself or herself and talk about the work that he or she did, hobbies, interests, amusements. Now, I knew from teaching public speaking in high school before I had come here that some people got nervous when they told a speech. But I didn't know that other people, or there were some people who were terrified of public speaking, and Alice was one of them. So Alice got up, and I knew when I saw her hand shaking as she held her 2 note cards, and I heard her say, I have a number of interests, and I work as a secretary during most of the day, and I have some hobbies I like to do too, and my main hobby is skydiving. Skydiving, I thought, she is terrified of standing in front of a bunch of people and giving a speech, but she didn't say jumping out of an airplane and hoping that her parachute will open was fun. I was bowled over. But during the years that I taught public speaking at IUPUI, I learned a lot. And Alice improved, and so did Ben, and so did a number of others. But the person who improved the most as the speaker was me. And that has helped me in all the years to come, both as a public speaker and as a storyteller.
What I really want to know is how come all those people out there who I know are teachers, were teachers, have not signed up to tell the stories. Man, waiting over the blank forms. Because I know somebody out there has a story they want to tell about teachers. Now, I remember, if you're a teacher, there's a rule of, is it 85? I can't remember now, it's been so long. You know what I'm talking about. That's when you discover that you have worked long enough and that you're old enough that you can retire. And when that day happens, I just started smiling. It was just like I was floating around the school. I was skipping through the library. I was smiling at everybody. And then I sat down and I did the math. And I said, I can't go nowhere. I have got to stay. But I had some friends, all my third grade buddies retired at the same time. It was a group effort. And another one of my buddies, Mr. Jackson, retired. And another one of my principal retired. And I was sitting at the going away dinner, and I was inconsolable because I knew that I should have been following them through the door. But no, I stayed on. But sometimes things happen, and you got to go when you got to go. My back went out, my knee went out, my hip went out. It got to be that my assistant principal would roll out in the beginning of the morning into my car to bring me my wheelchair so I could roll back into the building and work all day. Mind you, I was in so much pain that I half the time didn't know how I drove to work. All of a sudden, I looked up and I was there. And I looked and saw a boy walking across the tables in the library, and I thought to myself, ooh, why is that boy walking across the tables? Or did I yell at him? No. Did I scream at him? No. So when I called central office, the lady in human resources said, why are you still there? And I honestly could not give her an answer. So I took early retirement. My surgery was scheduled for May 3rd. I had a whole month because I left April 13th. But before I left, I had to sit in my wheelchair at the bus entrance. And every single child in that school gave me a hug and some chocolate. So by the time I got home, I had chocolate everywhere. I'm talking about copier paper boxes full of chocolate. There was chocolate in the freezer. People just came to my house so they could eat chocolate and take a bag home with them. I miss my teeth, but it's all right. I am now a retiree. Or as some kids say, I'm not retired, I'm retarded. That's what the joke was. At any rate, we don't use that language, but I'm happy to be a retired teacher. And with that, hold it up, Jack, it's your turn next.
I did not know I would get here, and Jen would fill me with doubt as to whether what I had is a story or a thank you. And I'm hoping the difference is whether the person being thanked is in the room. My 7th grade social studies teacher loved an in-class debate. Literally, it wasn't a speech class or a debate team, but she really would divide us up into pairs and give each pair a topic to debate on a later day with the class as the audience. And she picked me and, if I remember right, Kathy Klein, whom I barely knew, me to present for, and Kathy against legal abortion. And I wrote down our topic and I nodded up and down and tried to look like I knew what the teacher was talking about, which in truth, in 7th grade, I did not. So after school, I asked Mom and Dad, which I did all the time with one school thing or another, and never got the kind of reaction I got that day. And once they were satisfied I was not asking for a friend, things got calmer, and they said they would drive me to the library and drop me by the periodical index and the microfilm machines, and I should phone when it was a good time to pick me up. And I was there much of the day, and on the drive home I didn't say much, and that night I didn't eat much. And the next school day I looked up our teacher, and I don't know this for a fact, but it wouldn't shock me if maybe Kathy had the same kind of conversation with her. It's the kind that goes, I'm not sure you put me on the right side of this issue. And maybe my teacher didn't really rub her hands together like a cartoon villain, but she really did say, oh, I love when that happens. There's so much more learning that way. Which didn't sound like switching sides was going to be on the table. So I went back and prepared the best I could, and I wasn't talking with Kathy about any of this. She was my opponent. Who would do that, right? And the day of the debate came, I remember nothing. It's a blur. I think she won. If nothing else, the 7th grade girl probably had some focus and poise advantages over the 7th grade boy. We didn't compare notes afterward. I don't know whether her feelings on winning were any more or less mixed than mine were on losing. Our teacher was just the right kind of hands-off. She was not in the business of telling us what our takeaways should be. Mine gelled slowly over the days and weeks after and came out like this. Other people's decisions are not my business. It is my business that this should never need to happen because of me. And so there should never be someone unwantedly pregnant because of me. And I shared this with absolutely anyone with a strict need to know, which means no one at all for a long time. Because for me in 7th grade, it was several years yet before there was anyone with a need to know. And after that, late in college, I met someone, oh, I would so much have wished she would need to know, but she'd already told me she wasn't dating men. As friends, though, there was very little we didn't talk about. Two people who dig philosophy can get that way. I don't remember what she was taking. I was taking ethics and kind of see how it came up. And way later, at the end of that term, the eve of her graduation, which I was afraid meant goodbye, turned out to mean she had made a decision that concerned me that was worth sticking around for. And that surely depended on a lot of careful thought on her part, on a lot of things, including all the risks that she would not otherwise face. And for her to have trusted me to take those as seriously as she did was a kind of blessing to me that I probably need to thank my social studies teacher for all the way back in 7th grade. Thank you.
Yes, remember those sex ed films they would show us in elementary school? You know, they divide the boys and take them to one place, and then they have the girls see. I don't think it was the same film. The only reason I know that my brothers who were younger than I saw those, younger than me, they, my brother who would play with my cousins, and my cousin wasn't feeling good and told him to go away and leave her alone. And he looked at her in all seriousness and said, "What's the matter? Are you on your semester?" And I said, "I'm gonna tell Mama on you." Anyway, that's what that reminded me of, Chap. Thank you so much. It's not nearly as serious as your topic. But right now, I know Cat Lee's got a story that's going to be told. I can just imagine.
Hey! I'm not going to tell you about a teacher that made my life better. I'm going to tell you about the Dragon Slayer. So I need you all to take a deep breath. And at the end of this breath, I need you to go, fire. At any time during this breath, during the story, you want to breathe fire, you go for it. My youngest son was a bubbly child. He woke up every morning with a smile on his face. He had an incredible imagination. And my husband and I believe that a child with an imagination is a child who can problem solve and think critically. So we fostered that imagination. And when he decided that dragons were real, so did we. He had dragon costumes, dragon puzzles, dragon movies, dragon games, everything about dragons. So when he started to come home from school and say to me, dragons are not real, I was concerned. I should have been a lot more concerned. The first time I met her was at a parent-teacher conference. And the first thing she said to us was, teaching is hard. Having 25 second graders is hard. And I believe in discipline. One day, I go to pick him up at school, and he climbs into the back seat of the car, and he hugs his backpack, and he will not talk to me. Free fire. And I get him home, and he runs into the kitchen, and grabs a purple phone, and he runs into the bedroom, and he shuts his door. And about 15 minutes later, he walks out of his room, and he hands the phone to me, and he says,
Dad wants to talk to you. So I grab the phone, and my husband says, do not react. He's afraid of how you're going to react. Violent. And listen to what I'm about to tell you. So we in our household call this the incident. Time. He jumps up out of his seat, he runs to his puppy, he grabs his backpack or his lunchbox, and he comes back out, and she is standing in front of him. And she says, I did not tell you you can get up, put your lunchbox back in your cubby, and sit down. And then she proceeds to line up all of the kids, turn off the lights, and leave my boy in the classroom by himself for 45 minutes, crying. He didn't even eat his lunch. So when I hang up the phone with my husband, the first thing I do is give this kid the biggest snack he's ever had in his life. And then I call the school. And I call the school and I ask for the teacher. And they say, well, she's busy right now. We'll put you on her voicemail. So I leave her a message. And I go right back to the school and I ask for the principal. She's busy right now. We'll give you her voicemail, and I leave her a message. 2 days go by and I don't hear from anybody. So on the third day, I drive my son to school. I park my car and I go into the building. I go back to the classroom and I say to the teacher, can I have a few minutes of your time? And she says, I don't have time right now. So I went to the principal's office. And this was the most lovely lady I had ever met. When I told her about the incident, she apologized to me. She told me two things that surprised me. The first thing she told me was, a child can never be left unsupervised in a classroom. And the second thing she told me, it is illegal not to provide the child with a meal during the day. And then she said, I'll take care of this. Okay, that was fine for me. But it was 3 days later before I heard from the teacher. And she said three things to me that shocked me. The first thing she said was, children don't confide in their parents. I'm surprised you told me this. And if you don't believe 50% of the things that he says about you, I will believe 50% of the things he says about me. And so after that, I visited the classroom several times. And while I was there, I kept an eye on this teacher. And I took every child in this classroom about dragons. And she knew.
Let's breathe fire one more time. Listen, I just do not understand. Sometimes I hear people tell me things about horrible things teachers have said to them. And I can't believe it. Because nobody ever said anything horrible to me. They only said kind and wonderful things. So that when I was in Dallas attending a friend's funeral, someone in their 90s came in from Columbus, Ohio, and started talking about friends she had in the Gary public school system. I'm a graduate of the Gary public schools. And she started talking about her friend, Mrs. Oswald Brooks. And I said, oh, she was my second grade teacher. And she couldn't believe that I remembered my second grade teacher. And I loved Mrs. Oswald Brooks. And she couldn't wait to call her and tell her what I was doing. I am so glad that you told the class about the dragons. Right now, TJ Rollins about to tell us about dragons.
Miss Wheeler County, Narragansett County. So anyway, I wasn't planning on doing this tonight, so it'll probably be mumbo jumbo, but this blue bill was all three of my children's librarian at Indian Creek Elementary. and I haven't seen her since. I think we talked on through Facebook chat once. So anyway, she inspired me. And this isn't about you. But anyway, so like I said, I wasn't planning on doing this, so this is kind of off the top. My middle child, Sheldon, he was always such an obedient child. He never caused me a bit of trouble. He was the middle child that kind of my oldest was always lagging, didn't stay on track. And my youngest was just kind of, a girl. And so my middle child, he came home every day as a snore, very, did everything right. And so when he started at Indy Elementary, he had already been in preschool for 4 years. So I thought this will not be hard for him. He'd been in preschool, then he'd been half-day kindergarten, and I thought this won't be a problem with him. But it was, apparently. So about the first or second, well, he went probably the first week. And no problem, got on that bus and he came home and he was happy. And then after that, he was like, every morning, I'm not going. I said, well, you have to go to school. I'm not going. And so I thought, well, what's going on? Here, and I tried to talk to him, nothing, anything. All he would give me was, it's too long. Well, I got to thinking about that. I thought, well, they get picked up first and they get let off last. That child has been in kindergarten, but, it was 5 hours. Now he's gone for 7 hours or more. And so he didn't want to go. Well, one morning, my husband was home and Sheldon started the usual, I'm not going. Well, my husband thought, well, yes, you are. And I thought, oh my God. So he took him down to the little bus stop there in the street. And I was watching out the door. And everything's fine. They look like they're happy. Everybody's happy. Then the bus comes. And all of a sudden, I see Sheldon. About like that. Well, my husband is nudging him a little bit. About like that. And so all of a sudden, I see Sheldon's lunchbox go flying through there. He had thrown his lunchbox. He took off his backpack. He threw his backpack the other way. And my husband's still thinking he's in control. And he's kind of, I thought, you can't get him on the bus without his lunchbox. So then I see the bus leave, and I see my husband with my son walking back down to the house. It was not pleasant. So I took him to school, and there was a new principal at the time, and a great big tall man. And I sat in the parking lot with Sheldon for a while. We were already 30 minutes late. And I said, you have to go in to school. Not going. First grade. And I said, well, you are going. I will walk you in, or you can go in, not going. So he wasn't budging. So go in, they had this really sweet receptionist. Her name was Mrs. Apple. And I thought, okay, good, Miss Apple will come out and she'll go with her. Well, Miss Apple wasn't working that day. And so the principal heard me talking to whoever was signing for Miss Apple, and he said, I'll take care of this. Oh, God. So he comes out. And my son is sitting there, and he looks down, and says, good morning, Sheldon. It's time to go to school. And Sheldon goes, no. And he says, well, I'm going to count to 3. And I thought, I know that doesn't work. And he says, when I count to 3, I'm going to open the door and you're going to walk with me into school. And Sheldon goes, no. And this is a child who's very obedient usually. I was just so freaked out. And so he said, 1, 2, 3. And before he could get 3 out, Sheldon bolts over to my side, jumps over me, and opens the door and runs. And I was like, oh my God. So the guy said, stop.
He grabbed a hold of him by the back of the collar and he walked him into the school. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I was in tears. And I started going after, and he said, no, 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 Mommy, stay out here. You know, I thought, okay. So I dutifully went home. I immediately called, and I was like, okay, I'm Sheldon's mom. I'm calling to see how things are going. Oh, you're Sheldon's mom. I was like, yes, well, you know, so they said, well, he's thrown a fit and he's in there. But what happened was, you know, I don't know, I think it was just too long, and his teacher, Miss Thatcher, and it just about, it was so sweet. She was a young teacher at the time and so sweet and caring. And her mother, I don't know whether she worked or she would come in from time to time. And she said, I talked to her and she said, well, she said, my mother went in and talked to Sheldon and sat down with him and just really connected with Sheldon. And she said, I'm your teacher's mommy. And do you want to come with me and we'll walk around the school? And they walked outside for a while and she was just so sweet. She goes, now I'm going to take you in to see my daughter, your teacher. And you just come in and I'll sit with you in the classroom. And she did. And she was just the sweetest thing to him. And so I thought, wow, there is goodness there, you know. And every day for a couple of days, she would meet when he would come. I would have to drive him. He wouldn't come on the bus for a couple of days. But I would drive him. She would meet him in the office. And then pretty soon, they kind of graduated to college. His teacher would come and meet him. And then all was well with the world. So I love Holly Thatcher. Wise local now. And this lady, she was my kid's librarian. My oldest, Shiloh, and Sheldon, my middle, and Sabrina. And she was just the best thing in the world. And so I was so happy to see her and surprised when I saw her up here, but not really, because she was always a storyteller. So thank you. Listen, anybody else got a story? I know that reminds you of another one you want to tell. Another one? Okay, all right. But right now, Bonnie, is this Bonnie Meal or Mule? Meal? I'm gonna talk to you like this handwriting. Come on down, Bonnie. Hey, give me your phone.
I can't use it. Okay. Well, I had all the thoughts. Okay. I put them down. Hi. My name is Bonnie. Hi, everybody. I'm a former actor, and now I am dealing with anxiety. But I'm here for two reasons. One, my friends, Ophelia, Wayne, Ellen, Greg, and Ganesh. I didn't even know you guys were going to be here. I'm so excited. So it's friends, but it's also the theme of teachers. And I have had a lot of teachers. So I don't speak like this. I speak a little like this. When I heard the theme of teachers, I was very excited. But I also, because I think of a lot of people in my family and in my life. But I also get very angry when I think about not teachers, but what they have to deal with and the situation they're in right now. So it might be a little different, but I feel like I need to speak about that. So the earliest teacher in my memory is my mama, who ran a one schoolroom house, however you say that, in Virginia, and brought extra lunch because all the kids had been working since 4 a.m. I think of my mom, who became a minister, but also taught preschool in her church and was amazing and didn't allow Barbies or guns to be made of Tinker Toys or anything else, and was also comfortable when the little boy would ask, with the little turkey hand, he asked, where does the penis go? And she was like, I can talk about that. We're okay with that. So I think of her, and I think of, I know Ophelia was a teacher, and all these people in my life who are teachers, and I think of my brother, who was a teacher and just retired at 60, and was a teacher at the elementary school across the street from where we lived. And I think of him retiring early, and all of my friends and teachers who retired early because of what we asked of them. And I think about how there is a teacher's shortage, a serious teacher shortage. I heard, you all listen to the 7 Washington Post. If you don't, great way to start the morning. Not paid for that. But they talked about teacher shortages and how the reason that there are teacher shortages is because we're also asking them not only to be teachers, but we're telling them not to be teachers. You don't get to decide the curriculum, the stories, the books. You don't get to decide. You don't even get to help kids who are struggling with who they are. You don't get to do that, but I would love for you to be a nurse, a doctor, and an armed guard. This is not okay. And I'm angry on behalf of the teachers who are so sweetly telling their tales tonight and bringing like a lump in my throat. But that lump is also anger on your behalf. And the other reason I am inspired to talk tonight, because I am never inspired really to talk in front of people that much anymore when it's just me, is because I also have heard that there are education, there are colleges offering free tuition to anybody like my memo, Ruby, and my brother, and my mom, and all of you who are teachers and no teachers. They're going to be teachers. There was something born in them to be teachers. There's a calling, and I have a lot of ministers in my family, and a lot of teachers in my family, and the calling is the same. And so if you know of anybody, my hope is not to tell my story tonight, but my hope is that there will be better stories of teachers to come, and that those teachers may actually not bear the burden of tuition as they go into their field. So that's also, I wanted to share that. I just heard that. I want to make it better. Share this. Bless all of you who are teachers and who have, it's like all of us are kids, right? Of parents. We are all kids of teachers. So thank you, all those teachers. We have your backs. We're trying. Keep doing that. Thank you.
Speaking of free, because I don't know if you know, if you're old enough, you can go to a lot of colleges for free. And I don't know, can I get a doctorate for nothing? Yeah. I'm thinking about it. In between my happy hours, I could possibly do something like that. But I want you to know that there is an Armed Services Arts Partnership, and they offer free classes to veterans, service members, military spouses, family members, caregivers, all those people. I've been all those at one time except for veterans. Listen, you can take an acting course, a comedy course, writing, improv, visual arts, and guess what? Storytelling! So I'm gonna pass some of these cards out. So if this is something you might be interested in doing, I'd be so happy to have you. But right now, I got another tip. Ooh, Debbie, is this gallery or gallery? Gallery, come on down. Hi. Hello, everybody. So, I think my story's gonna be a little bit different, because, teachers come in all shapes and sizes. So I'm gonna talk to you about my oldest and dearest friend. And I met her when I was standing in line to sign up for classes at the local college. It was a very long line, and she was just behind me, so we started chatting. And by the time we got to the table where we were to sign up for our classes, we had decided to move in together and be roommates. We were both looking for something to live with. So we moved in together and we became like bosom buddies kind of thing. And it's interesting because other than that, we might never have met. We grew up in Montreal. Montreal is a city that's built around a mountain. So she grew up on the west side of the mountain, and I grew up on the east side of the mountain. And she grew up in upper middle class Jewish family, and I grew up in a working class Irish Italian family. We just never would have met. But we met in that line and we became very fast friends. And it was nice because we got to know each other's families, that kind of friendship. So over the years, it's one other thing that's really quite unique is that we both ended up marrying men from New Zealand. How about that? Right? So she moved to New Zealand and raised her children there, and I ended up in New York raising my children there. But because we were both from Montreal, and my husband's family was in New Zealand, we got to see each other over the years. So when I go to New Zealand to visit my husband's family, we always did a detour trip to visit Ruth. So I got to know her husband, I got to know her children, and vice versa. And this was back in the day when, couldn't afford a long distance phone call, and there was no internet, so we wrote long, copious letters, and stayed in touch. So fast forward a couple of years, she has 4 children, I have 3. And my oldest is just around 12 years old. And if any of you who are parents, you know what it's like having your first teenager? So we had no idea what to expect. And our oldest was extremely sensitive and had extra challenges. And we just were out of our depth. We had no idea what to do. He was really struggling. We didn't really understand what was going on, but he was starting to go off the rails. And we were so unprepared. Plus, we were trying to make sure that, we had this nice family for the other 2, like trying to protect them. But he was using drugs, and he was coming home in the evening with the local policeman and stuff like that. And it was very, very scary, and we were overwhelmed. So somewhere in there, I had written her a letter and told her, we're having a hard time. And a little while after that, I got a letter from her saying that unbelievably, she was going to come to a conference in New York, all expenses paid, and would I like to come to her hotel and spend some time? And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, this is a person that knows me from the old days. And I thought, wow, this is a godsend. So she was, she didn't have a whole lot of time, but she had carved out a few hours in this schedule that she had. And so I took the train into the city and I go to her hotel and I'm knocking the door and we sit on her bed. And I've been holding this stuff in for a while. Because if you know how it is, like if you have a 12-year-old and your friends all have 12-year-olds, because that's what happens, right? But none of them have started to struggle with their 12-year-olds yet. It's really hard to talk to them and say, you just came home last week. I can't tell you this because you don't know what I'm talking about, and you're going to judge me. So it was really hard. So it was just me and my husband talking back and forth all the time, right? So we sit down on the bed, and she says, "What's happening?" And I burst into tears, of course. And I proceeded to cry and talk simultaneously. And I basically, there was
liquid stuff coming out of every orifice. I was sobbing and my nose was running and, you know, it was pretty messy. And I just kept talking. And while I was talking, Ruthie did the most astounding thing. She just sat there and listened. But not only did she listen, she sat there and the whole time I was talking, there were tears running down her face. And I don't think I'd ever been listened to like that in my whole life. I mean, it was, I just never have. It was an experience of real, unconditional, true love. She didn't give me great advice or interrupt my story. She just sat and cried because she actually empathized with what I was going through. And that experience, of course, it gave me some courage, which was helpful. But actually, it turned my life around. And it was only years later that I understood how significant it was, because I actually ended up becoming a person that listens to people for a living. And I think something about that experience really spoke to my deepest self. And I wanted to do that for other people. And so she was a great teacher for me, a teacher of real love. And I'm always deeply grateful to her for that. Thank you.
Now, there's still time, you got to still around the room, I know they got going. You know what I'm saying? You know, my people don't really care about teachers. I was a weird one, you know. My thing was school. I was good at school. I loved to read. I don't remember learning how to read. I grew up just reading the newspaper that they used to spread on the floor to, you know, after my aunt had waxed the kitchen floor, and I just lay down there reading. And they would look, I had that sepia magazine, I just have it open, I just be reading, and my aunt would look at me, oh, isn't that cute? She's just looking at the pictures. Then I started telling her about what I was reading, and she snatched that magazine out of my hand. But nobody else wanted to be in school like I wanted to be in school. So it was just natural, I guess, that I became a teacher. But I went through it backwards. But I really just wanted to read books all day, and I played in the library. But now, my family, I would bring my mother to school with me. Like, I would look around and see how all the other teachers had their husbands and mothers and nieces and nephews cutting out the little manipulatives. Y'all remember that, right? Or helping put up bulletin boards or making little mailboxes. I couldn't drag my family into the school. Once my brother was recovering from a truck accident, and he wanted to use my car. And the deal was, if you come to my school and read my kids a story, then I will loan you my car. That's the only time he had it. Okay. My mother, who had Alzheimer's, and I thought, well, let me take her to school with me. She can help me do blah, blah, blah. She was so uncomfortable at being at school that at lunchtime, I had to take her home. But it's a disease, it's an illness, it's a passion. That's what makes a good teacher. And I can tell that we've had better teachers than most, okay? I can't remember a teacher I disliked. But I do want to thank you for telling me some good teacher tales. You got any more? Anybody? Well, listen, let me remind you that you can make contributions to Storytelling Arts of Indiana and Freetown Village. You can do it a real easy way. You could make an online donation by texting SAI to 44321, and we promise to split the donations evenly between Storytelling Arts of Indiana and Freetown Village. Now, did you fill out all the forms so we can have a drawing? Our drawing's gonna be a really great thing because you will receive a pass for the 2023-24 Storytelling Arts season. That's worth big money. I hope everybody feels one out. Now, let me remind you, next meeting, Chatham Tap and Butler. And if we need to go to a bigger room, we will go to a bigger room. But now I'm at the age now that every time I go somewhere, I run into one of my kids. Sometimes they remember me, like I was at the doctor's office once, and the nurse came around and said, our tech thinks you were one of his teachers. I said, I probably was. Who is it? And what school did he go to? And once I found out his name, I said, how many loud black librarians did he have? And to come back here and talk to me. So I just love when that happens. But right now, do we have the results? All right. Okay, we got too many ties here. No, that's not a tie. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. I'd like to congratulate our third place winner is Bonnie. And we want to take pictures at the end. Congratulations, Bonnie. Our second place winner is Francis Winder. Congratulations. And our tie is at first place. And it is Samantha Powers and Diane, I forgot your last name. Starts with a W. Walton. Come on in. Congratulations. Are we ready for our drawing? Yeah, they're gonna come up so we can take their pictures. Okay,